Good evening, James.
How's this?
Hello.
You to who?
All right, now where's Dwan with his motion?
Right here. I'll make a motion.
Good man.
I'll make a motion that we select James Stone to start the meeting.
I'm not very good at this. I'm the elder of your bunch and passed this a long time ago. But if someone is going to pick up on it in just a minute or two, maybe we can get started if that case. I guess.
We have a second?
Second,
Who was that, Charlie?
Charlie.
I'm third it and fourth it.
In that case, all we need is a vote and get started.
All those in favor?
Oh, yeah, and here comes our vice chair. So
Okay, let's go to that route.
there we go. Thank you all for trying. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Okay, Steve.
Yes.
Yeah, Mark Celsius going to be a little bit late. We just had a vote to have James start the meeting since we had 5 and you and Mark were both not in attendance yet, but we're turning it over to you to go ahead and start the meeting.
Yeah.
Going through
You haven't done anything.
No,
All
we
right.
haven't done anything yet, but Mark should be about 10 to 15 minutes, I think.
All right. We'll go on and call this meeting to order. I apologize for being a little late. It'll be April 8th, 2021 GSC PC regular meeting. And the first item of business, I suppose, would be our approval of the March invoices.
I move that we approve them.
We got a motion to approve the March invoices, and do we have a second?
Second.
That was second by, was that Charlie?
Yes.
Mr. Mifflin?
Yes, sir.
All right, motion by James Stone, second by Charlie Mifflin to approve the March invoices. All in favor, say aye.
All right.
Any opposed? Motion passes. All right, the next item would be the approval of the March 11th, 2021 minutes. If everybody's had a chance to look at those, take a motion to approve them. I think I did have one correction on there. It's a very slight correction. On the second page, top paragraph, there's about the third sentence that said Muddy Ford Road would share an assessment easement. I think that's supposed to be an access easement, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. Good spot.
That's the only thing I noticed. It didn't quite make sense.
Do they call that part of it Muddy Ford Road or is it 922?
I think either one.
Yeah, it's
I
both.
think it's both.
Yeah, the Newtown Extended.
I think. All right.
Anyway,
We can make
Any
that.
other corrections? Any other corrections, or do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion by Mr. Stone. Is there a second?
Second,
Is that David?
It's David in it.
Dwan.
Oh, Dwan. Second by Mr. Garrett then. All those in favor say aye.
All right.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Item C would be the approval of our April agenda. And I think as it's shown right now, we have 3 to hear. 2 have
Correct.
been postponed.
Correct.
And then the zoning text amendment for mobile homes, that'll be another business. Do we need a motion on this one?
Yes, sir.
All right. I'll take a motion to approve our April agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion by Mrs. Singer. Got a second? Second by Mr. Stone. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion passes. That brings up items for postponement or withdrawal, and I think that did include item C in new business, which was PSP 2021-10 Cherry Blossom Village Phase 9. That's been postponed.
Right.
And also item E in new business, ZMA 2021-12. That's a Singer property. It's also been postponed. That brings us to item E, consent agenda. Is any of these eligible for consent tonight?
I think there are two items eligible, the Heimer property. Well, Matt,
Yes.
since these are both yours, are they both eligible? Heimer?
Yeah, they're both eligible for consent.
Okay.
Okay.
Item A, Heimer property, and item B, St. John's School are the two eligible.
All right, we'll take those one at a time. Let me know, Matt, if there's anybody that raises their hand that would like to hear either one of these. But first, we'll look at item A, a new business, FSP 2021-08. That's the Heimer property. A final subdivision plat to subdivide 1 5-acre lot from a parent tract of 137 acres located at 269 Browns Mill Road. If anyone wanted to hear this application or was opposed to it, raise your hand, let us know. We'll give them about a minute, and then I take a motion to approve it by consent.
I don't have the slide up after this one, but for those of you who are in attendance at the meeting, there is a raise hand function on Zoom. If you just, it should be at the bottom of your screen. Just click on that if you would like to hear the application. Otherwise, the Planning Commission will take a vote to approve it by consent.
I think we've given it sufficient time.
Yes. I think so.
You want to make the motion that we approve this one by consent?
I make a motion that FSP -20 or 2021-08, the Heimer property be approved by consent.
All right, that would be,
Charlie Mifflin.
yeah.
I'll second it.
I might mention that would include are there still 5 conditions of approval, or has that been reduced now, Matt?
There are still the 5 conditions of approval.
5 conditions? Okay.
Yes.
All in favor? Let's see, who had the second there? I'm sorry.
I did, maybe.
Dan Smith.
Oh, okay, whatever.
All right, Dan had the
Go ahead.
second. All right. All those in favor say aye.
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 All opposed, like sign. Motion passes. All right, if anybody's on right now, I think you can go to the planning office tomorrow and sign papers. This thing should be ready to go. That brings us to the next one to be considered for consent agenda, which would be PDP -2021-09. It's the St. John School Cardome classrooms. A preliminary development plan for a 8,747 square foot classroom building. It's located at 800 Cincinnati Pike. It's on US 25. If anybody would like to hear this one, please raise your
Steve.
hand. Yes.
Stephen,
Yes,
just for the record, I'm going to recuse myself from this one since it adjoins John's property.
okay. We still do have a quorum, right? I'm not sure. I'm not seeing everybody up here right
Yes, you
Yeah,
do.
I'm here too also, Steve.
now. All right.
But you're doing such a good job. Finish this one at least.
All right. We'll give them we'll allow another 30 seconds or a minute, see if anybody has any questions or comments or wants to hear this application. Not hearing anything, I'd be willing to take a motion that we approve PDP 2021-09, the St. John School Cardone classrooms by consent. Does anyone want to make that motion?
I'll make
I'll make,
proof.
Is that Mark?
Yes, sir.
Motion by Mr. Sulsky. Do I have a second?
Yeah.
Second by Mr. Stone. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Mark, you want to take it back over?
Yes, sir. I'll take it. Thank you, sir. I appreciate you filling in, and you did a great job, Steve. Next on the agenda is PDP 2021-11, the Village of Falls Creek, request for preliminary development plan approval for 27 townhome units in Phase 2 of Falls Creek Village, located east side of Falls Creek Development.
All right, this is my project, so I'll go through the staff report. I guess first thing, I made a slight change to the staff report. I didn't mention at workshop, and I didn't have it in my staff report. This is a subdivision plat as well. So they're asking for approval for the preliminary development plan for the townhomes, and then they plan to subdivide the property. So we need to get a vote on the subdivision plat as well if you vote for approval. Okay. This is, you'll have to do the slides, I guess, Matt. This is the last section of Phase 2. So the applicant presented a subdivision plat previously at the February meeting to approve single-family lots and 5 duplex townhome lots in the first part of Phase 2. And that was approved at the February meeting. It left a large area of 4.02 acres that had been shown on the master plan as part of Phase 2, but they postponed the development plan because they didn't have it prepared in time to present it in February. So they're coming back with the remaining land in Phase 2 and asking for approval for 27 townhomes that will be split into individual lots. And they will be accessed from an extension of Falls Creek or of a public street that's being extended out of existing Phase 1. It's I think it's not Falls Creek Drive, Watterson Park Drive. So Watterson Park Drive is being extended to the east, and then hitting an intersection and going to the left and to the right. So to the north and to the south. The north section will end in a cul-de-sac, and it'll be single-family lots that were previously approved that back up to the existing single-family area that's developed already and platted. And then to the south will be this cul-de-sac that'll serve these 27 additional townhomes. So some of the townhomes will front on the street and be served. We'll have rear access garages off a private drive. And then there'll be some townhomes at the end on the cul-de-sac that'll have front-facing garages. So it's a combination of front-facing and rear-facing garages. And then there's two buildings, building 33 and 34 on your plans, that face each other across a pedestrian green, that don't have vehicle access from the front, just only pedestrian access to their front doors, and then rear access to the units from this new private drive. I guess to start out, this is phase 2 as shown on the previously approved master plan. You went too fast, Matt. Can you go back? Yeah. Okay. This is the phase 2 master plan as originally shown on the 2005 master plan. It showed 52 single family units. You can see Waterston Park Drive that comes off right here. It's split, and these two, there was a cul-de-sac to the north and a kind of a loop road to the south. And these were all single family lots in this area, 52 total. Kind of gone through this history already, but I'll just repeat myself a little bit for those who haven't heard it. There was a change in the floodplain boundary when we updated our floodplain maps. It kind of cut across a lot of these single family lots, and especially these down here on the south and on the northern, very northern end. Essentially, a lot of those lots became unbuildable. So this layout was no longer feasible to do. So that's the reason, that's what triggered the request to come back and amend this plan. So they submitted an amended master plan for review. Initially, it showed what they subsequently came back with. So it showed single family lots and townhomes, essentially single family lots to the north, townhomes to the south. There were two parts to it. I guess the first thing we talked about is the change. So this blue area is the plan that's in front of you tonight, the area that's in front of you tonight. The red area, essentially, you already approved back in February with single family lots to the north and then 10 attached townhome lots to the south. And then 3 lots along the existing Falls Creek Drive on the kind of the northwest part. So 2 parts. There was a change in scheme of development ordinance passed by the city in 2015. So we looked at it and discussed whether they needed to make a presentation and get a vote on whether this was an appropriate change in scheme of development, since they had an approved master plan and had developed out the early phases of the subdivision. And now we're coming to change this later phase. After reading through the ordinance, I think it's pretty clear that they would comply with the ordinance as long as they submitted these areas into the existing HOA regime. So they don't have to go through the whole presentation and get a vote on whether this is an appropriate change at this time. I think based on our reading of the ordinance, we just need to get a vote that they're meeting the requirements of the ordinance before we actually vote on the plan itself. So that's going to be when we get time to take a vote. The first thing we're going to have to do is take a vote to affirm that they're in compliance with the ordinance. You can go back, Matt, to the development plan. It must be skipping when you hit it. Okay, so that's the first thing we need to do is just look at that scheme of development ordinance, changing scheme of development ordinance, just make and affirm that they're in compliance. I guess the second issue I have with this is that the original master plan showed 52 single family lots in this area. The original zone change had a certain ratio. This was a mixed use development. It was approved as a mixed use development. It was approved as a traditional neighborhood development with, common architectural standards, but different types of housing and mixed use buildings in the commercial center. And it has followed that common architectural plan. But the original zone change approved 338 units in a certain ratio of apartments, townhomes, and single family. So they were approved for 163 apartments and mixed use multifamily, 20 townhomes, and 155 single family. So 338 total, 163 multifamily, 20 townhome, and 155 single family. So they were approved for changes over time. So that the multifamily kind of morphed from mixed use buildings to all standalone apartments. The townhome numbers increased a little bit, but they generally, the multifamily and the townhome stayed in those areas that were previously approved for that type of unit. So this development is in an area that was previously approved for single family. It's adjacent to a single family area that had seen the lots already platted and sold off and built, houses built and sold to individual owners. So it's my opinion that due to the change in floodplain, they should be allowed the number of units that were previously shown in this area. But I don't see the justification for increasing the number of units in this area when it was previously single family. Areas have been sold off already. And changing the ratio of types of units that were previously approved does not seem justified in my mind. Now, this isn't a zone change. This is a mixed use community. So the Planning Commission may feel differently about that, but it seems to me that changing the ratio and changing the number of units, the density of units in an area that was already shown one way on the master plan, I just have not seen justification for it. So I don't feel comfortable recommending approval for that. Beyond that, I put that as a condition in my recommendations if you do recommend for approval. So you will have to address that if you choose to approve. This plan as it is, I would take that out. It's condition number 8 in my recommendation. So getting beyond that, looking at the plan itself, you can see it here. So it's all served by an extension of Waterston Park Drive. That's the name that for some reason I can't remember. Keep that name in my head. So it's an extension of this public street to the south. And the townhomes are pretty standard townhomes in 4 of the buildings, I would say. So there's multiple buildings with a different number of units attached each. So at the end of the cul-de-sac, there's 2 3-unit buildings that are served by front-facing garages and a shared kind of parking area and access area that will be in a shared access easement. I don't really like all that pavement, but these units at least have area to park off street on each individual lot to meet our parking requirement. There's going to be some green area in the center, in a mail kiosk. And I think you know, even though there's setback, there's a lot of paved area, it doesn't fit into really the design of the rest of the community. It's kind of way to the south and out off the main streets. And I mean, I guess we can live with this just because I don't think it's the best design personally, but at least there's the parking area available and they can landscape it, you know, so it's not going to be highly visible. The remaining kind of units, to the first units is a series of 4 units, and then there's another 3-unit building. Those are rear accessed. So they'll face, you'll see the front of the units. Presumably they'll have front porches. They'll face the street. So, I mean, those are ideally the best kind of design for this type of development. So don't really have any issues with those. And then the 2 other buildings with the pedestrian access, kind of they face this pedestrian green. Not necessarily opposed to that type of design. It's been used in other areas. It's been used in this traditional neighborhood development type of scheme or community. I guess there are 2 real issues that I see with it. One, I think the buildings at the end are too close together. If they were going to pinch in, I think it would be preferable to have them together in the front and widening in the back so that your view would open up as you look into the pedestrian green. But I think they're too close. 30 foot is too close together in my opinion. And I'm recommending in my staff report that they be separated with 25-foot front setback, so 50-foot separation. But I think that could probably be reduced if there's going to be front porches. I think a front porch will provide some kind of semi-public space and some buffering between the units and the pedestrian green. So I think that could be reduced slightly with the front porch, and I put that in my staff report. The other issue, I guess, with these units facing a pedestrian green is that the only vehicle access is from the rear, and they're showing it in a 20-foot private drive with parking spaces behind the garage. They're 2-car garages, so parking spaces behind the garage in a diagonal kind of parking scheme. So they've got a parking pad in front of each garage, only 8 to 10 feet deep. And each unit, since these are 2-bedroom and above units, all of them, each unit requires 2.5 off-street parking spaces. In that extra half parking space, it's put in our zoning ordinance to provide for visitor parking and to provide, you know, it's some additional parking that's usually needed in this type of development, and it's been shown to be needed. And usually it's provided in a kind of standalone visitor parking area or a spillover parking lot, you know, of not a huge size, but it can be spread out. So maybe in 2 5-space areas and on each end of the development or something to that effect. But so yeah, the problem is with emergency access, I think, to these units. We did have the fire marshal look at it, and the fire code requires 20 foot of clear area for private drives to provide for emergency access, fire truck access. They are showing 20-foot drive, but the way these parking pads in front of the garages, I think, will function as people will end up parking over the drive. So they'll park kind of maybe haphazardly or just spill over into the drive. In addition, I don't think that the spaces that they're shown behind the garages can be counted towards their parking requirement. You know, just because I don't think they'll function to efficiently serve as parking areas. So I guess the two issues are really the width of the access. We feel like because this is the only vehicle access to these two buildings, that width should meet our private street standard, which is 26 feet with curb and gutter, or at least reduced to a width that that the fire department would approve. And then these parking spaces, I don't think can count towards our parking requirements, so they would need a variance to our parking requirements to reduce it by 10 spaces. Because basically, I don't believe we should count these spaces that are not at least 18 feet in depth as off-street parking spaces. Other than that, the density issue aside, if you do recommend approval or you do approve this plan, I'm recommending the conditions of approval in my staff report. You can probably discard number 8, but if you don't feel like the density is an issue, but I guess condition 3, 4, and 5 are related to those items I just discussed. So the access, number 3, the access should be a minimum 26 feet wide or minimum width approved by the Georgetown Fire Department, or a 25-foot front setback along these two front-facing buildings facing the pedestrian green, which I'm recommending can be reduced to 15 feet front setback if a front-facing garage, a minimum 6 feet in depth, is added to the front of the units. And then the minimum depth of parking behind the garages shall be 18 feet to count towards our off-street parking requirement. And then I've added a few pictures, just if you have any questions. We had a few top things come up at workshop. So this is another example of front-facing units. This is Hatch and Wilkes-Barre, Lexington. I mean, this is a much higher, more expensive, I would say, development. So these are larger units with 2-story porches facing a similar green. This is probably 50 feet here in this picture. It narrows down to 32 at one end, but then it kind of opens up. And then I put another image here. We probably won't look at it right now, but if this is just a town. This is in Cherry Blossom. So Mr. Mifflin brought up a question about an existing development. So I threw that in there if it comes up for discussion, but we don't have to look at that now. So essentially, I'm recommending denial of the plan as shown, but if you recommend approval, I'm recommending these 12 conditions of approval. Just take note of number 8. And then in addition to that, I've added the language that you would be approving a preliminary development plan, but you'd also be approving a preliminary subdivision plat to subdivide these units as well. And I added a 13th condition for the subdivision plat, and this is just standard for subdivisions, that any shared access easement, they shall provide a maintenance agreement for those shared access areas. So I did make those 2 changes from workshop. So condition number 13, and then just the note that you're approving a subdivision plat as well.
Thank you, Mr.
all I had.
Thank you, Mr. Kane. Commissioners, any questions for Joe?
Hey, Joe, this is Charlie. There are several of us on the commission now that weren't on here when this development started. And you have referenced a couple of times the total number of units. And so where is that? And I realize the floodplain caused them to change some of this, but what is the the big difference in the numbers of what the original plan called for and what we're getting now.
You just want me to review what the original zone change approved a development of 338 units.
All right.
163 multifamily in a combination. It was a combination of mixed use buildings in the commercial center and then standalone apartments. So it was a combination of both to make up the multifamily. Then 20 townhome units and the remainder single family. So 155 single family. You also have to keep in mind that there are two parcels on the other side of the creek that were included in the original zone change and master plan. In that, the original plan called for a bridge to cross the creek to access those areas. And I think they had planned for some apartments over there. So some of the apartment units were actually across the creek in the original plan.
Okay.
I had the original master plan, I think, in the PowerPoint last time, but it's essentially multifamily was in the commercial center, and then there were some standalone apartments across the creek, and may have been some a little to the south where the apartments are now. I can't remember right offhand, but they were a combination of mixed-use buildings in the commercial center and then some standalone apartments. Townhomes were essentially where they are now out there. It was shown where the townhomes would be, and the remainder was single family. The area across the creek was always part of the development, and they got part of their density off that land across the creek. So those two parcels that really, I don't think anybody really considers them part of Falls Creek just because they're undeveloped farmland. You know, nobody really, I don't know if we have an aerial that can show, but just across the creek, there's two parcels on the, here where, yeah, go back, man.
For development.
So anyway, right in this area, these two parcels were part of the original. So 330 units were, you know, it included that area over there. But I mean, so this is multifamily and townhome. This was mixed use, commercial, office, residential second floor office, and service commercial uses on the first floor. And maybe it was 3 floor. Maybe the Smiths can probably explain their concept originally, but originally it was approved 338 units.
So this area that we're looking at tonight has always been for townhomes. Is that a safe statement to make?
No, it was always single family, this area. So we're looking at this area now, right here.
Okay.
Yeah. I think if this is approved, we will have the current ratio of approved units would be 160 apartments, 59 attached townhomes, and 91 single family, with 28 dwelling units remaining.
Joe?
Yeah.
If we look at this plan that I think it's lot 32A and 35D, if those two lots were done away with, or two units, 32A and 35D, you could open up the space down the center through the pedestrian area. You could widen out in both directions, increase the street size from 20 to 26 feet, maybe leave a little space off of the buildings. And will that work going up in behind these others if you press that out both ways? I mean, that would be 2 less units. And then I think you could have some street parking as well as that. If you widen those out, I believe that your off-street parking outside your garage would be deep enough to work, wouldn't it?
Yeah, possibly. I mean, they'd have to draw it out for me to see it for sure, but possibly.
Basically, I mean, that would give you enough, deep enough area behind the garage to park and not be out in the street.
Yeah.
I thought, and that might be, I think Brent said something about that at the workshop meeting, that they were considering making those streets wider. But I think you could gain everything that you're looking for, getting widening out the area through the pedestrian easement.
Yeah, I mean, I think they could make amendments that could address all my concerns. I don't know. I haven't seen anything, that they haven't presented anything yet. So, I mean, I guess I would like to see it, and I don't necessarily want to review it at the meeting tonight.
All right.
So, I mean, if they are going to make substantial changes, I'd prefer to go back through TRC. But if you all are happy with their changes and think they would work, I mean, we still need a final development plan, so we can review it at that stage too, if you all are comfortable with that.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Thank you, Mr. Kane. Any more comments or questions by the commission? If not, I'll open it up for comments by the applicant.
Right, good to go, Mr. Chairman?
It sounds like you're good to go, Mr. Billings. It's funny, I didn't have you listed as an attendee. I guess I have you listed as a panelist. So it threw me going, okay, where is Attorney Billings? But Matt's got you listed as a panelist, so that's why.
Somebody let me in early.
I guess.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the Planning Commission. As you may recall,
Charlie, I guess Mr. Billings, we should probably swear you in. Mr. Perkins? Up, you're muted, Charlie.
Yeah, I was just so surprised that he's a panelist, and then I realized he's here all the time. He might as well be.
Yeah.
Mr. Billings, you raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm the statement you're about to make to be the truth to the best of your information and belief?
I do.
Thank you, sir.
Why don't you go ahead and swear in Mr. Combs as well?
All right, Brent, same thing. Do you swear or affirm what you're about to say to be the truth to the best of your information and belief?
I do.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you all. Floor is yours, Mr. Billings.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen of the commission, as you may recall, my name is Nathan Billings. I'm with Billings Law Firm in Lexington. It's my pleasure to represent the applicant, Oxford Place, tonight with respect to this townhome portion of phase 2 of the Falls Creek development. As you all were speaking there a minute ago, Mr. Mifflin, you asked good questions, and as well as Mr. Smith. And I think that what I have prepared is actually going to answer your all's questions in hopefully considerable detail, having sort of projected from the staff report and the workshop some of the things we needed to address tonight. So hopefully no one has made any conclusions from staff's presentation or from the questions there. I was reminded a few minutes ago as Joe talked about this project about a story about a federal judge over in Ashland named Judge Wilhoit, who was a heavy-handed federal judge. And my dad relayed a story to me that he used to have settlement conferences between parties. And this was years ago, and there was a death case. And you had the insurance defense firm on one side that said, we don't know anything, we're never going to pay anything, we're never going to pay $1. And you had the estate attorney, who was the plaintiff attorney, who was claiming millions of dollars. And he told them both in a settlement conference, both of you write down your numbers for me. Everyone knew the estate was in the millions and the insurance defense attorney was at 0. And he says, slide them across the bench to me. And they gave him the numbers, and he picked one up and looked at it, laid it down, picked up the other one and looked at it. And he says, gentlemen, believe it or not, you're not that far apart. Now, afterwards, we learned they were millions of dollars apart, but that's what he told them to start off that settlement conference. And so I've always remembered that story about Judge Wilhoit. As Joe was talking tonight, I actually realized the same thing. We're actually not that far apart here. I've got a presentation, as you all sort of know my style, but as I listen to Joe talk and go through the concerns, I think this is one of those cases where the benefits of the process result in a better project. And believe it or not, there's only one point of disagreement we have with staff and Mr. Kane tonight. While I have a presentation to make in some detail, sort of the quick summary is the only issue I'm going to sort of talk about tonight is the density. Everything else Mr. Kane has talked about, we're in agreement as to staff recommendations on making. We don't have a new staff. We don't have a new plan to submit for staff review yet. I've got to show you, we think we can satisfy some of these, but we have the ability to go, or actually the requirement to go through a PDP or a final development plan regardless. So with that, am I allowed to share my screen, Mr. Summers?
You should be able to.
Let's see here if I can do this. And do you have a PowerPoint presentation up that starts Villages of Falls Creek now? There we go. All right. Well, there we go. So tonight we have two issues for the commission. The first one I think is a simple issue, which is whether or not this development plan seeks to amend the common scheme. We had a call with Mr. Kane and Mr. Perkins about 2 weeks ago, and we reached sort of a consensus. The commission still has to make a decision. We can't bind it, but all of us agreed this does not seek to change the common scheme as long as these townhouses and these units are submitted into the Falls Creek HOA. They're going to do that. We commit to doing that. It's a condition of approval inside of this. So I think that's a non-issue. The commission will have to make a vote. We did provide a proposed a motion. There was a typo error in that, and it said 37 units, and it's 27 units. I just wanted to make sure the commission knew that in case they may have noticed that. The second issue, of course, then is whether to approve the actual PDP, which we think that you all should, subject to the staff conditions with the one exception on density. So this comes to the common scheme. We think it's well within the commission's discretion to make the decision that this does not change the common scheme. It's the same way you all made the same decision in February regarding PSP 2021-4 on the single family portion of phase 2. There's our recommended motion. Same thing staff put before you. You probably don't have to be this technical, but if you want to be, it's already drafted for your convenience. In order to address a little bit of this, what I want to do is I'm going to skip ahead. There we go. I want to sort of tell you what the key aspects or characteristics of this portion of phase 2 is. So first of all, it is for 27 single family attached townhomes on 6.7 acres, and that fits within the R1c Pud that the zone change it took place in this property in 2004. The key characteristics of this proposed development plan include there's 6 buildings, 27 townhomes, which consist of 22 bedroom and 7 3-bedroom. There are 2 private driveways access easements that you all have seen on the plan. We are actually going to exceed the number of parking, we believe. Our required parking is 68. We think we're actually going to provide at least 83 units, and I'll show you where those are in just a few minutes. As submitted, here's the plans, what staff has proposed. That's what you're actually voting on tonight. If you accept staff recommendations regarding the ones we agree with, again, I'm setting aside the density issue for the moment, assuming everything else is approved as staff has recommended. This plan is close, but it doesn't comply with all of the conditions. So we do have to come back to some revisions of that. Again, I'll show you a potential revision to that later on, but it's not ready for staff review. So the staff report sort of talked about the common scheme of development. Staff found no change. We're in agreement with that. Again, I think that's a simple issue that you need to vote on at the end of the presentations, but it's a simple vote. The other issues staff addresses are density, which is page 2 to 3 of the staff report. The setbacks on page 3 of the report, parking on pages 3 and 4, emergency access on page 4, and then the waivers. I believe that with the changes we're going to make, we actually only need to have one waiver, which concerns the curb, gutter, sidewalks, and the private streets. And I'll get to that later on when I get to the waiver section. So again, looking at the conditions to the preliminary subdivision plat as recommended by staff, condition number 1, all previous zone change applicable conditions we agree to. Number 2, shall be submitted into the existing Falls Creek HOA, we agree. Number 3, and this is just where through the process of a project, multiple people looking at and making recommendations result in a better project. While as on the plan is submitted, the private access streets are only 20 feet. And considering staff's comments and looking at revised layouts and looking at necessary things for fire protection and the typical street layouts in Georgetown, we agree to make the rear access streets to be a minimum of 26 feet in width and to comply with any fire department regulations. Next, the 25-foot setback on the front facing units, which would really be a 50-foot buffer, or a minimum of 15-foot between porches, which would be 30 feet plus the 6-foot porches would be 42 feet. Either one of those, we're in agreement, and I have again proposed again, it's not to be voted on, but the plan I have revised. But we agree with staff condition that this can be done, and it results in a better spacing between the units, just like the picture Joe showed you a minute ago. 5, the minimum depth of parking pads be 18 feet if used to count for off-street parking. We agree with that. Otherwise, we just need standalone tenant spaces to be provided. We're going to provide those. You'll see where we suggest they could be provided on the final plan. But again, we agree with the staff condition as they're recommending. 6, open spaces to be maintained by the HOA. We agree with that. It's a typical sign off. 7, all the previous architectural standards should apply. We agree with that. On that note, the last meeting, a bunch of owners sort of asked questions about architectural standards, and I actually went all the way back to the 2004 and 2005 and then 2007 plans and looked at the substantial amount of architectural standards. We don't really need to vote on tonight, but I would encourage the commission, especially those people who are newer to the commission, if this does come up again in the future, that you actually go back and have those the older presentations and the 3 or 4 pages of architectural standards presented to you. A homeowner sort of said it's one style and everything needs to look like one style, and that's actually not correct. The style that's approved, as actually submitted for approval and approved out there, is actually very, very broad and has lots of different characteristics. And although the building style out there right now generally complies with 1 or 2 styles, overall, Falls Creek actually had 4 or 5 styles imposed for the development. But anyway, we agree with staff recommendation. Number 8, staff has recommended that the maximum area of dwelling units in phase 2 does not exceed the total of 52 dwelling units. We don't agree with this, and I'm going to tell you why in detail. So that's the only placeholder to come back for a lot of discussion. Number 8 is a typical final subdivision. It has to come back to staff. We agree to that, but either final subdivision plat or final development plan. Number 10, 11, and 12, and staff has now added a 13, which I've added in here. We agree with all of those typical sign-offs, don't have any issues with them. In the words of Judge Wilhoit, you're actually not that far apart. We really only have one issue, I think, to deal with in detail, being the density issue, recommendation number 8. So number 8 recommends that the maximum number of dwelling units shall not exceed the number of units previously approved in the master plan. We respectfully disagree with staff for a number of reasons. Instead, we would ask the commission, if you want to impose a condition number 8, that you only need to include that the overall density shall not exceed 338 units, as the commission has done in every prior case, preliminary development plan, preliminary subdivision plan, or all the amendments that have gone on through the history of this large-scale multi-use traditional neighborhood development. I'm going to go back in time, and I think this was a good question that Mr. Mifflin asked. For those people who are newer to the commission and don't have perhaps the depth of history, I didn't either, Mr. Mifflin, so I had to go back and educate myself when I got engaged in this back about 6 months ago. So the first thing I'm going to show you is this is the zone change map that was originally proposed and approved at the time of the original zone change in 2004, closing on 20 years ago. You'll see the area where my cursor is moving around is where it says single family detached. This area was generally supposed to be single family detached housing, which standalone houses. At the same time, there was a concept plan or master plan for the same area. Had the same, it's two plans and one zone change, but they're very similar. Come back. You'll also see that this is going to be the R1c Pud. That's the zoning right there. So these types of units are allowed in the R1c Pud. So 2004, the density plan suggested this. For the overall single family detached lots, which was a significant portion of this property, you'll see all of this yellow was all single family detached original. Townhomes were in the bottom left corner of this map, or what would be the southwest of the property. The office residential, the blue area and the reddish area, was going to be mixed use with residential units above offices and commercial space. And then to the northeast of the property, where Mr. Kane referenced, was going to be multifamily or apartments. That was what was supposed to happen originally 20 years ago. That's not how it's developed out for lots of reasons and valid reasons, but that gives you an idea of how different the property is today versus when it was originally approved nearly 20 years ago. So looking at the actual density, you had 150 of the single family detached lots. SFD is single family detached against standalone housing. You had 25 proposed townhouses, which were going to be in the bottom left corner. And you had 163 apartments, which are going to be in the northeast corner across the creek. The next year, there was an amended master plan. This is the drawing or the plan that Joe submitted to you all regarding phase 2 for the single family. This is the last plan that really touched phase 2. So we're basically 16 years removed from the last time the Planning Commission has reviewed anything to do with phase 2 until February of this year, when you approved the area that Joe sort of highlighted with in PSP 2021-4. The 2005 master plan, it decreased the single family lots by 19. It increased the area that would be developed for townhouses to 46 units, but again, it never changed the density. It always remained 338. So again, the 2005 master plan density decreased the single family lots to 132, townhouses, multifamily, 338 units. This was sort of a snapshot of what those 43 townhouses would look like. However, those townhouses were never constructed as approved under PDP 2005-73. In 2008, an amended preliminary development plan was approved for the same sort of area with 70 dwelling units in the same general area. This wasn't constructed either. 2011, another plan came back amending that area where the townhouses were to be and the assisted living was to be, to convert those into, I'm sorry, this is a different area. It's convert 13 single family lots into multifamily units in sort of the middle of the property. That's 2011-17. In 2015, the assisted living area was again amended to allow 10 apartment buildings with up to 80 units. It required the transfer of density residential units from the mixed use area into the apartment developments. Now, phase 1 is complete of the apartments called the Heritage, but there's still other multifamily that have been approved but have not been constructed. Since 2011, there have been a number of other amendments to these plans. Sort of for brevity, I'm not going to go through every one of them. A lot of times they're either inconsequential, but here's what I can tell the commission. Since 2004, when it was originally approved, starting only a year later, the Planning Commission has consistently and routinely allowed the mixed-use traditional neighborhood design for Falls Creek to be flexible in accordance with the comprehensive plan's goals and objectives, to keep density fixed at 338, which is very, very important, and no request has been made to change that, but to allow flexibility and choices of housing units and housing types. In fact, in December 2020, the staff noted that these approvals have been made historically because the general uses of these areas were shown on the original master plan. In other words, we're not asking for a new type of housing unit in this development that wasn't existed in 2004. All we're asking for is the reallocation of the types of units and the reallocation of the numbers of units. We're not asking, for example, to come in and say, everything is now going to be multifamily, get rid of single family, attached, get rid of townhouses, get rid of duplexes. No, we're not coming in and saying allow manufactured housing. No, we're keeping in compliance with the original zone change intent that this be a traditional neighborhood development with mixed uses and mixed housing types. All we're asking the commission to do, which it is authorized and has approval to do and has done consistently since 2005, is to reallocate the number of units between different housing types. It's never resulted in an increase in density. So here's an example, just one quick one of 2018 where duplexes were added to the middle of in the property near Village Park Drive cul-de-sac. A question about how's the density changed over time. So what I have prepared for you all, and this builds upon a chart that staff graciously prepared back in November or December, showing the density of each type of unit, single family, detached, single family attached, or what are often called duplexes or townhouse, and multifamily from the 2004 master plan, from the 2005 master plan, from the 2011 townhome plan, to the 2015 apartments, to the 2020 proposed master plan, when we came back to you in December. One of the things you'll notice from this chart is that the single family lots have continued to decrease slightly with each change in time. We believe this is consistent with the changing demographics in America where there is a decreasing number of people who want to own single family detached housing. As a corollary, you'll also see the multifamily apartments started at 163, they dropped down to 129, they came back up to 163, and they're now being suggested to be reduced again. The biggest change in this has been the single family attached, meaning duplexes and townhomes. It started off at 25, it was increased to 60 in 2005. It actually went up to 93 single family attached lots in 2011's townhome mixed use center. It then decreased under the 2015 apartment approval. Now we're coming back with the master plan that we submitted in December but didn't require any approval and we couldn't build on. With our proposal, that what this would do is give 68 single family attached units if I've calculated these correctly. This is important because I believe it shows, if you go back to 2011 and look, we are still below the overall number of townhouse units that was approved by this commission in 2011. The change has been the apartments have come back up, but what we're trying to do is to figure out how to balance a mixed use development in a changing economic environment over time to meet buyers' expectations. So if you recall, here's the snapshot of the plan, the master plan that we came before the commission before in December. Again, no approvals were required. We couldn't build on this. It was just a concept. This says, here's what we're thinking. And we got feedback, I think an hour and a half or 2 hour hearing. We had lots of good comments from the commission, lots of good comments from staff, lots of excellent comments from neighbors. And we incorporated those and we came back in February, actually we filed in January, but came back in February with PSP 2021 for the single family area of phase 2, single family houses and duplexes. That was approved in February after, I don't know, another hour and a half or 2 hour hearing. One of the things I want to note in the 2020 master plan, a couple of key characteristics we suggested, which we are continuing to be consistent with, is the 23 single family detached lots, which was approved in February. The 5 single family attached duplex lots, which was approved in February. And what we had suggested then was 32 single family townhome lots. Today, having heard some of those things, we have already reduced by, I thought it was 35, it's 32, but reduced the townhome lots by about 18%, by 5 units, because of some of the very concerns that staff has raised in its recommendations here, as well as mentioned briefly in February, as well as the lengthy discussion we all had back in December. So here is the plan that is as submitted. You'll see there is building 1 has 4 units. Building 3 has 3 units, which are all front facing towards the cul-de-sac. And there is except for 1 unit, common share drive. I didn't put it in the PowerPoint, but I have a existing development in Lexington on Daly Place. If the commission wants to show you what one looks like as built, I can show that to you. We have another building with 3 units that has rear entry garages. All these garages are, I think there's a comment in staff report that says they're 20 by 20. They're actually 21 by 21. Sometimes details like that get missed at this stage because of the scope of a preliminary development plan versus a final development plan or final subdivision plan. And so these 3 units have rear entry garages, and the 4 to the what's on the right side of your screen or the north side of this project would also have 4 with rear entry garages. And then in the middle, which I think is a key characteristic of a unique design, and I think it's going to be beautiful, is the 2 buildings that have front facing with the common area sidewalk with the rear entry garages as well. That's how it was proposed. Now, they did sort of apex in, and not exactly, but sort of an A shape or triangle shape. And I think staff, rightfully so, had some concerns about how they were going to deal with the telemetry, the setbacks, the facing, and staff recommended that we splay them out. Same thing, Mr. Smith, you were just talking about a minute ago with those setbacks. And Mr. Combs has worked this week very hard to come and sort of show how those could be fixed. Again, this is not for approval of the plan tonight. All I want to use this is to show the staff's concerns that they have raised in the staff report. Again, I'm setting density aside, can all be resolved in this, and staff is correct. We can't build on this. We still have to come back to staff, but it moves the center units outward. It keeps the buffers, the setbacks like they asked for. It makes the streets wider. It adds parallel parking on it, just like the regular street designs, adds 5 direct pull-ins. So all of staff's concerns have been considered, have been weighed, have been respected, and have been agreed with, again, except for the density. So again, we're not asking for approval of that draft revision. I just showed you all that as a concept to say, hey, we agree with staff's comments. We agree with staff's proposed conditions of approval, and we think they can be met. If we can't meet them, we've got to come back to the commission anyway. So I talked about how the buildings 30 and 31 on the south or the left side of your document, they have 2-car garages with 18-foot aprons. So they have 4 parking spaces. We talked about the width of the private access easement would be expanded to 26 feet. We've added parallel parking spaces on that 26 feet, which is the regular standard street width in Georgetown with parking on one side of the street. We've added 5 direct pull-ins. We splayed out or rotated out buildings 33 and 34 to be more square. And the front setbacks have been adjusted for staff's comments to sort of not really mimic, but to respect the setbacks and boundaries along the photo that staff showed you. So in other words, we've reviewed each of these, and as should happen with comments from the TRC and the staff report and the workshop, we have considered those, and we've agreed to all of the staff's recommended conditions of approval. So the things like setbacks we're good with, the parking is good, the emergency access is good, and the waiver. And the only waiver we then need is to deal with the sidewalks, the curbs, and the gutters on the private driveways. Here's some examples of what this would conceptually look like. We don't have an artist rendering. Staff gave you a similar picture. Here's one that would look, sort of giving you an idea of the front-facing units with the front-facing units with the porches and the setbacks. Our setback would actually be a little bit bigger than this one. Where is this one? Is this Amerson? This is Amerson Orchard, right? Yeah, so I think this is one in Amerson Orchards, right off the bypass that you all approved a couple years ago, that has actually smaller setbacks than what we have here, just by looking at them. Another example. These are the rear entry garages that would have, this has, in Amerson Orchards, you actually approved back-to-back rear entry garages. And what we're suggesting here garages that back up into each other. We've tried to avoid that on this plan. This gives you an example of what it would look like on one side. We didn't want back-to-back garages, so we've tried to avoid that. Another example of the rear entry garage with a small apron. All of these garages are 2-car garages. There are garages that don't have large aprons. We don't get a parking credit for those. They're 3 or 4 feet to allow safely backing out. But again, the project, the staff's recommendations as to parking, we agree with. So let me come and talk about the density justification. Why we think that the commission is justified to allow us 27 townhomes on this 6.5 acre site for this project. First is it is still less than 5 units per acre. Under Georgetown's continuing growth standards, when you have less than 5 units per acre, while it is still and appears to be dense, you're still preserving backyard space, green space, open space, and not building areas. This is just the tension of a growing city is when you want 2 or 3 units per acre or 4 units per acre, it requires the urban service boundary, the city boundary to be expanded and for additional housing to take place on agricultural and rural farmland. So we think that this helps continue to balance the goal of the comprehensive plan to go a little bit above regular density on acreage, but it's not being excessive. And again, it doesn't change the density for the whole development. We believe that if you all were to adopt a recommendation number 8, all you have to do is to say, we approve this, but it still doesn't change the density of 338 units for Falls Creek as a whole. Also, in my review of the 2004 zone change concept plan and zone map amendment, I don't believe that the zone change itself required there to be a certain number of housing units per housing type. While the concept plan proposed them, the concept plan is not the required allocation of the number of units or the types of units. It certainly rezoned the property to R1c, the area we're talking about now. But as everyone knows, in the R1c, you have multiple housing choices within the PUD, and that's the design of a PUD. The intent of a PUD is that you allow flexibility for housing types rather than having a strict R1 or R2 or R3 zone, which only is going to lead to a certain type of housing unit and a certain setback. The R1c allows flexibility in design and implementation. Second, Joe's already alluded to this. We've talked about it at length in the December hearing and as well as in February. The floodplain boundary necessitates the change in this is one of the things. We've lost housing units for single family because we can't basically cross the creek now. Also, as I noted in my chart earlier, we're really only dropping 2 less single family housing across the board from what happened in 2005. So we're not drastically affecting the density of single family detached housing in the development. What we're affecting is the number of multifamily units. Now, for all of the owners and neighbors who complained about townhouses before, from a purely mathematical and statistical analysis, people didn't want renters was the #1 concern we heard from people. We are taking units from multifamily apartments where there will definitely be renters and tenants, and we are moving them to townhouses where it's substantially less likely to have tenants. There still could be tenants. There could be tenants in single family detached. I don't want to ignore that. But when you're moving them from apartments to townhouses, you're not requiring them to be tenants. With multifamily, they have to be tenants. They don't have a choice. So we think this helps at least address a concern the neighbors expressed that they wanted fewer tenants in the neighborhood. Also, Falls Creek has always been a traditional neighborhood design. Go back to the very first zone change. And it's replete in 2004, 2005, 2007 about all of the importance about T&Ds, how they're developed, how they're designed, the importance of flexibility and housing choices. And in fact, if you look at continued studies from T&Ds, this is one that we found in our research, that one of the reasons is that the American dream of single family detached homeownership continues to shift in America. And as you look at this, you have young and single couples, empty nesters, retirees, non-traditional families. Those are changing. What that means also is the housing choices people are making are changing. This article came out in February after our last hearing regarding townhome construction expanded. I have a typo there. It's expanded, not expenses. Expanded to a 2.5-year high. Why? Because people are looking for things other than single family detached housing, and they're pushing into markets like duplexes or townhouses or condominiums. So with that said, we believe that respectfully, staff's comments about density, or staff's recommendation about density on phase 2 being limited to 52 units is an error. And instead, the commission, as they have routinely since 2005, should allow the developer freedom and flexibility in accordance with the TMD design and the comprehensive plan and the commission's prior decisions to allow 27 townhouses on this over 6.5 acre site. But make sure that you're saying the density for the overall project is not being changed, because you've never allowed that to happen. That's always been very expressed. It's not to change. So moving past the density issue, the only waiver, staff recommended 3 waivers in their report. Because of the staff recommendations and our agreements, we really only need 1 waiver now, which is on the 2 private access streets. Their staff has recommended we need a waiver for the curb, gutter, and sidewalk requirement. Specifically, the sidewalks are provided for each of these units. They just happen to be in the front of the unit, not in the rear of the unit. Because of that, we don't think that we should have sidewalks on the rear. Second, any curb and gutters that would be required on the rear, on the private access easements, we believe should not be required. Now, I don't know if they'll be added or not, but I think we should get a waiver for those because, one, this has to be owned and maintained by private owners, not the city. And I don't want to put a responsibility on owners. They're already going to have to maintain the easement, meaning paving of the asphalt and maintaining that. But to then add an additional duty for the homeowners to have to maintain curb and gutters, which includes tying those potentially into the storm drain system. And for private homeowners to have to maintain those, to me, seems an unfair burden. Instead, these private access easements are going to drain one of 2 places. They're either going to drain out in the city right away, which is already maintained by the city, into the city curbs to go down. And by the way, if you require curb and gutters, all that's going to do is require these private curbs and gutters to be emptied into a public curb and gutter system. It's either going to go above ground or it's going to go below ground, or they're going to drain out into the grass area on the back side of these properties. We think that that's a better result than having the private homeowners have to maintain the curb and gutters along these right of ways. Otherwise, we agree with staff to meet all of the width requirements on the private access easement. And to meet or exceed the off-street parking requirements, so no waivers needed on those 2 issues. As I've told you, you all know this about me. Typically when I have a contested issue, I believe that having the meetings with homeowners is helpful. You should recall we had a massive turnout in December of homeowners on the commission call. We did a massive call with owners in January before the original phase 2 hearing in February. Just like this, we wanted a staff report, and then we had a meeting this Monday night. We had 2 people call in. No other emails, no other phone calls. So tonight, I know there's 2 or 3 people on the call, at least there was earlier. I'm not sure how many are left now. There's 4, so it looks like maybe 2 or 3 people. In fact, the 2 people called on the other night are also on tonight, Miss Casey and Miss Kane. So, there's not a lot of homeowner comments I have for this presentation because we haven't gotten many, but I do want to make sure that we look at the things the homeowners raised in prior meetings concern property values, crime, the floodplain. I think all of those have been addressed. I think the issue of parking is a valid issue. And that's why we've agreed with staff's recommendations. We've widened the access easement and we're trying to provide, I think our final plan will have at least 10, if not 15 extra parking spaces. And with that said, one of the comments we heard from homeowners, and I think this ties in with staff's recommendation regarding the density. If we don't put the density for these townhouses in this location, we're going to have to put it somewhere else. In this location, these townhouses are tucked away in the back of the development, which will result in cars coming through the development. I don't want to downplay that or ignore it. But what it does do is if we have to move the density up into the middle of the development or towards the entrance, you're going to have all of those additional cars parking where the density is going to be located. So you're going to have all of those additional cars parking in the middle or parking near the entrances to the subdivision, which is not desirable. It is much more desirable to pack that density in the back of the subdivision, make them park on private land, off-street parking, and not put it where all the single-family homes are now. So I get that they don't want cars through their neighborhood. I can't change that. It's just their public streets. But I will tell you from a design standpoint, it's my opinion, and I think Mr. Combs would agree, that the location of townhouses with a density that's greater than the single family detached is better to have tucked away in the back and have the trips per day to go back there, but have all of the parking pushed on their private access easement and garages and streets, rather than on the public streets in the middle of the development. So there's a tie-in between the concept of parking and density and the location of those. In other words, if we're limited with density here, we've got to bring that density back somewhere else. If we bring it back somewhere else, there's going to be more parking somewhere else. It's the necessary consequence. So we think that having it in this location is the lesser of any potential evils that the homeowners could complain about. So that being said, we respectfully agree with the vast majority, all but one of the staff's recommendations. We respectfully ask for the commission to approve the PDP and PSP. I thank Mr. Kane for also adding in the preliminary subdivision plan and his staff notes. I had it in my presentation too, except for recommendation number 8, and that the commission modify that just to say that the maximum density for the Falls Creek development shall not exceed 338, and the approval of the single waiver for curbs, gutters, and sidewalks off of the private access easements. Mr. Chairman, thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions that the members of the commission might have for me.
Thank you, Mr. Billings. Any questions by the commission? Mr. Combs, would you like to add anything? Mr. Billings went first, and I know.
Not really. If somebody has a question, I'll try to answer it, but
Okay.
you did a good job, I think.
Any questions by the commission for either Attorney Billings or Brent Combs? Otherwise, I'll open it up to public questions. If looks like we do have a few people on here. So if any of the attendees would like to speak to Matt Summers' points, please click at the bottom to raise your hand, and we'll definitely open it up for comment questions by any of the attendees. No questions for anybody who's in attendance? I guess doesn't look like anybody has questions. It looks like a lot of people are on here to listen. So thank you for joining us. Joe, would you want to, or Charlie chime in, Perkins, is everything that Mr. Billings covered to your liking? And I guess I'll open that up to Mr. Kane first. And then as far as the legal standpoint, I'll call on you, Mr. Perkins, next after Joe speaks.
My concerns were addressed, but I haven't had time to review the plan. I just saw it, on the screen there quickly. So, I mean, I think either you allow staff to review it and approve the final development plan, or bring back the final development plan, or we postpone it a month to review the new layout. I mean, I don't know about that personally. I would rather see the overflow parking in a standalone lot or a couple of smaller lots rather than, as parallel parking on the drive. I would just still be worried about parking spilling over into the street. I mean, it may work, but I would like a chance to look at it closely. I mean, I would be a little bit worried about turning radius too, getting in and out of the garages.
What was your first option, Joe?
Well, I guess my first option is to postpone approval of the preliminary development plan till it goes back, till we review it.
Oh, actually, I meant the first thing you said, the first option that you mentioned.
About the parking?
Oh, when you said we could either do this or this, it was the first this.
I've forgotten already.
I think it was to take action tonight, but then have staff.
Oh, okay. If as a board you were comfortable you could approve the preliminary development plan and then just ask for the final development plan to come back to the board for approval.
Well, the final development plan's got to come back for approval anyway, doesn't it?
Anyway,
Well, typically it's staff level approval, so it doesn't come
Okay.
back to the board for the final. So it's the final grading, construction, erosion control. So it's the final set of site construction plans are part of the final. So that's all.
we're fine with that. We're fine with that, Joe. Mr. Kane, I think that if we change number 9 to shall come back to approval of the planning commission prior to development, we just have to remove one word in condition number 9 then.
Okay.
And perhaps in the meantime, Joe, you all could take another look at it and give any feedback you have back around just to expedite things then as well.
Yeah, we could do that. Yeah.
I think if we're able to get that to you next week, can we still get on the docket for what's the hearing in May, Joe?
Yeah, second Thursday in May. TRC is on Tuesday, so we need, I would like to get something before Tuesday if we do it that way, just to get fire department comments. And
I'll tell Brent he's got to work all weekend.
Like he's close already.
It'd be May 13th would be the meeting.
Okay, that would be terrific.
I have one question about the curbs. Is that on the backside of those two 16-foot wide streets? Is that what you're talking about?
20.
That you want to eliminate?
it would, yeah, I think you would have to, our private street standards requires curb and gutter. So it's just a blanket variance to curb and gutter on the 16-foot section and the 20, whatever, 26.
Oh, and the 20.
26 foot.
26-foot section would be our standard street. I think what they're showing, there's a, we allow in the zoning ordinance, an access easement to serve 5 or fewer lots, something like that. So I think the street required would just be on those two buildings that face each other. So the 16-foot section wouldn't technically require it to be a private street width or design. So the variance would just be on the road going in. Ben might want to chime in here on our street standard.
Yes, this is Ben. I think what the 16-foot areas they're showing meet both requirements, where you can serve with a single driveway, serve several units. It also meets alleyway requirements, which could be a lesser width as well. So yes, that we don't have any problem with those 16-foot areas, and it doesn't call for curb and gutter on those.
So the 20-foot wide streets, if they didn't have curbs and gutters, how would they end? I mean, it's not going to be like a county road where it just drops off, is it? Or will it butt up next to, I mean, there's not a sidewalk running down through there. Will it just butt up next to the driveway?
Yes, Mr.
We don't.
You sort of have, I guess, 3 areas that you're going to talk about here, and I have a suggestion for a solution, and then tell you the technical stuff. My suggestion for solution is that we put that as an item to resolve on the final development plan to come back to you next month, because the reason is I think there's 3 different actual technical areas we're going to talk about. One is where the private access easements enter the garage. There's going to be an apron that has to be sloped to prevent water flow into garages. Second is you're going to have parking areas along it that is probably going to have something to stop people from parking blocks over into the grass. So I think we need to consider something like that. 3 is, I think then we got to talk about, do we really want curbs and private gutters that are actually running the water into, are these just above ground gutters, or are you actually talking about in-ground storm sewers? But I think if we just say as a recommendation, this is going to come back to the next month with a resolution of sidewalks, gutters.
Runoff.
Cutting out.
That's why.
Attorney Billings, you're really cutting out. You froze, I think, there. We can't hear you. We may have lost Attorney Billings.
Can you hear us?
Okay, basically what he was saying was they'll address those issues when they come back next month.
Matt, do you want to, looks like Mr. Combs is trying to speak. Would you unmute Matt and let Brett Combs speak until Attorney Billings comes back?
Yeah, Brent should be able to speak.
Yeah, I'm good. I just had my hand up to be recognized. But what I was going to say is a little different than what Nathan said. Is I actually don't see any problem in putting curb and gutter in areas that it makes sense. The one side is almost continuous along the garages, and so there wouldn't be curb and gutter there. But on the opposite side, if I were designing it, I would probably use curb and gutter in those locations. And then another thing Joe mentioned was he's worried about back out. Well, we've got at least 4 feet from the garage to the start of the 26-foot street. So even with parking, that allows the standard back out area for cars.
And Brent, you feel confident that the parking, the off-street parking pad would be at least 18 to 20 feet or something?
Well, if we need pull-in type, yeah, they'd be at least 18. The parallel parking stall, is more of a 8 by 20 foot length, and the city street spec is 26 feet wide with parking on one side. So we're not doing anything that goes against what's in the subdivision regulations by having the parallel parking.
Right.
Sorry, Mr. Billings, you missed the vote. Just kidding.
Yeah, he sent me a text, says his internet went out.
Did you say miss the boat or miss the vote?
No, I said you missed
the vote too.
The vote. I said just kidding. Sorry.
Yeah, he sent me a text that his internet went out, so I'm guessing he's not going to be back.
No, he's back.
Oh, is he? Okay.
Yeah.
I just got back tethered to my phone, so we're good.
There you go. So any other questions for either Attorney Billings or Brent Combs? Or, we've got a couple different options here. I'll leave it to the commission to decide which direction you'd like to go. I'll go from there.
Which sounds like,
Is there, and if we go with the option that at least gives us preliminary approval and then comes back for the final next month, does it help us eliminate some of the backlog for potentially controversial or items that people want to speak about extensively for next month, which could be our first in-person meeting? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. That's one of the reasons I threw it out to start with.
Joe, would you be okay with that? It sounded like both the attorney, Brent, would be okay with that because it would at least keep the ball rolling. It would give everybody a little time to hash out some of the details, and then they could potentially make the deadline to then hear it next month. Well, if you all can come to approval or could on some of those different decisions.
If we get a plan if we get a plan tomorrow or Monday, I guess, so that we can take it to TRC on Tuesday. And if we can work out any issues that we have before corrections, which would be 2 weeks prior to the May meeting, which would be last week in April, I guess. if we can work out, I mean, if we can come to some resolution with some of these design issues and access, then yeah, I'm okay with bringing the final back. But it's kind of up in the air now until we, look at it. It will increase the load for the May meeting, but it is what it is.
If Brent does his job, it should be easy.
Well, what I was going to say is, I don't think we really ought to call it a final development plan because there's no way I can get that ready. I think what we're talking about is just kind of resubmitting the preliminary and getting the kinks worked out.
So then we would actually postpone it till next month.
I can't answer that, but I, final development plan is a full set of construction plans, and so, that's not going to happen by tomorrow.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
this is Charlie. I think rather than call it postponement, because I don't want to get into any questions about needing any new notices or anything, I would just simply say that consistent with staff report and with applicants' agreements to virtually every point, we just continue it to next month for the updated plan so that staff gets a chance to actually put hands-on to all the agreements that have been stipulated tonight.
And again, I'll leave that to the commission to make a motion and a vote.
Do we need to vote on the one item stating that we feel that this is in compliance with
Yes, with the changes scheme of development.
Yeah.
I would like to see that voted on tonight just to get that out of the way, because I think that's a very clear action.
There we go.
So I would entertain a motion if somebody's willing to make that motion regarding common scheme of development.
If I might point out, Mr. Chairman, I believe Nathan said earlier that 37 should be 27.
Correct.
Other
Yes.
than that,
27 townhomes, right?
that and the evidentiary hearing would be April 8th.
You mean May?
No, after the evidentiary hearing tonight, which is April 8th,
Oh, you're correct.
you move that.
On April 8th.
I corrected that one, Charlie.
Well, I know you did, but it didn't get circulated. So those two, when you read the motion, someone, just those two corrections and we're ready to roll.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Smith.
I would make the motion that we accept, or I would move this motion as printed here, or as it's written with those two corrections, the 27 townhomes and also this is on April 8th, and leave the rest of the text as is.
Okay, so I've got a motion by Mr. Smith.
I'll second.
I have a second by Mrs. Singer. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. So we've got one off or done. Now we need to decide. I know Mr. Perkins says not to
We want to continue it.
postpone, but let's use the word continue. So if you are going to make a motion to continue this till next month, this way new notices do not need to be sent out, et cetera.
So, Mr. Chairman, I know that the staff recommendations, I think there's really only one discussion point on the density issue that is a substantive matter. From a recommendation standpoint, we're in agreement with all of the staff's recommendations. And although I'm not typically involved in the redrafting of plans, it seems to me that the process is typically the applicant's plan is submitted, frequently needs to have amendments done to it to be in compliance with the conditions of approval imposed by the commission before the applicant can move forward. So I don't know if I think it's proper, but it may not, but maybe I'm wrong, is for the commission still to vote tonight with the conditions of approval. But that because the plan as submitted doesn't comply with the conditions, we still have to submit a revised plan to go to the next phase. And that in the process, as staff is always welcome to do, if the staff does not believe it complies with the conditions of approval, they can then bring it back to the commission for a hearing on either the final subdivision plan or the final development plan, which is the time of early construction plans.
Unfortunately, though, I think Mr. Combs says he would not be able to meet any of the deadlines to bring this back next month for a final. So he actually seemed to recommend himself that he would prefer that we continue this to next month, hash out the details, and then bring it back the following month for final. And that was what Brent.
I guess what I'm suggesting is that perhaps the commission would vote tonight to approve the PSP and the PDP with the staff conditions. And then we would file the final development plan to still come back to the commission. It just might not be for 2 months instead of 1 month then. In other words, the final development plan would, on recommendation number 9 for approval for tonight, instead of reading to come back to the planning commission staff, perhaps we just make that come back to the planning commission.
I see what you're saying.
What I'm trying to help do is to continue to advance the ball for the applicant here, but at the same time, make sure that the necessary precautions are in place that the planning commission is satisfied as to the changes.
Joe, do you and Perkins, you both seem okay with that?
That makes sense to me.
Okay.
If they agree to the conditions of approval that are in the staff report, if you all are happy with if you're okay with the density, as long as they meet the conditions, they can come back with a revised plan for staff review. If we're not happy with it, we can bring it back saying, this doesn't meet the conditions that they agreed to. Otherwise, they'll just bring back the final development plan when it's ready to the commission.
Mr. Chairman, I always agree with that because I think that's a more efficient way of doing it, unless, of course, something breaks down. But no, I totally agree. And we've got it on the record, all the agreement to the conditions.
Sounds good. With that being said, I'd entertain a motion unless there's any other commission.
Hold on, except for number 8.
Yeah, we do have to deal with number 8, Mr. Chairman.
We would have to strike number 8.
Correct.
My suggestion is not to strike it, but just to say something as simple as the density shall remain a maximum of 338 for the Falls Creek development.
If I might suggest one thing, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I believe that actually Mr. Billings is correct about that, because generally speaking, when you approve a zone change, you really don't approve necessarily a maximum number. That maximum number then gets developed out according to the densities permitted in those zone classifications, and then just the way the property can be developed. So by stipulating the 338, I think the applicant is already stipulating more than maybe zoning law itself actually requires. And since we've maintained 338 throughout, I think it's only appropriate then to keep doing that. But generally speaking, the maximum is the zone classification times the units per acre that we permit, with the calculation that comes just by the development. So if they stipulate the 338, staff goes through and says, sorry, but you're only going to get 335 because it won't handle it. Well, then that's what happens. But we don't limit numbers generally on the front end, I think, to be fully compliant with state law.
Is everyone okay with that? Joe, you okay with that?
Just to be
Yeah.
clear, there are only 12 conditions. Did you mention earlier, Mr. Billings, that you had a 13th condition?
Mr. Kane added a 13th condition that we are in agreement with.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, I forgot about the maintenance agreement. All right.
Yeah. For the plat.
All right. So you want number 8 to read the maximum number of dwelling units shall not exceed 338 units for the
entire development.
For the entire, yeah.
Okay. Again, with that, I think if everybody's comfortable, if there's no more questions, I will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I
Yes,
would
sir.
make the motion that we accept, see, this would be PSP and PDP. Sorry, yeah.
2021-11.
2021-11, both PSP and PDP, with the 13 conditions of approval. And that would be with the correction to number 8, simply stating that the maximum number of dwelling units shall not exceed 338 for the entire development.
So I've got a motion by Mr. Smith,
I'll second that motion.
and I've got a second by Mr. Mifflin. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed?
Aye.
Okay, so it looks like motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Billings and Mr. Combs. Of course, get a hold of planning and zoning and to file or to sign all the documents. Appreciate it.
I'll make sure that I'll make sure we'll come over tomorrow and get it assigned to Mr. Perkins' office.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you, members of the commission. Thank you, staff. Thank you, Mr. Krebs, Mr. Kane, and Mr. Summers.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is zoning, other business zoning text amendment, mobile homes, public hearing. So it looks like we'll have to open this up to a public hearing. So I need a motion to go. Right? Charlie, I need a motion.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, you can just open the public hearing.
Well, yeah, we'll open a public hearing for zone text amendment, mobile homes. And if I'm not mistaken, Matt Summers, this is you.
Yes. Thank you. I guess just sort of to make sure that we all talk about all this with the same language. The first couple slides here, I'm going to go over some background information regarding how our ordinance defines different types of mobile and manufactured homes. But just to be clear, we are not proposing changes to these sections here. So currently we have a definition for manufactured homes. Refers to single family residential dwellings constructed after 1976 or June of 1976 in accordance with the National Manufactured Home Construction and Safety Standards Act of 1974. It requires connection to utilities, including plumbing, heating, air conditioning, and electrical. We also have a definition for qualified manufactured home, which is a manufactured home. So it would have to meet that first requirement plus additional standards, including a more recent manufacturing date. It must be attached to a permanent foundation. It's specified a certain size requirements, including a width minimum of 20 feet and a minimum living area of 900 square feet. And it also specified that they could not be located in manufactured home land lease communities. Other definitions that we have that are related, we do define mobile home, basically be a vehicle or structure that's basically made in a way that it can be conveyed upon streets for one or more persons to live in. This does not include RVs that are under 30 feet in length. And this definition, our ordinance says, applies to units constructed prior to that June 15th of 1976 date that we saw from the previous slide in reference to what we call manufactured housing or manufactured homes. So the ordinance talks about 3 different types of residential uses or developments, I guess, that use mobile homes. The first being a mobile home park, which is a large tract of land or a single tract of land, basically that has one or more mobile homes on it. So this would sort of be the equivalent of like an apartment complex. You've got a single tract of land that has multiple dwelling units on it for, and those could be either, I guess, sold or leased. Then you have a mobile home subdivision, which would be, equivalent to a single family neighborhood. You will see the property actually subdivided for the placement of mobile homes. Those lots could be sold or leased. And then the third type we have is our mobile home camps. And those are, I guess you could think of those as almost as campgrounds intended for, RVs or things of that nature. So it's definitely targets a shorter term accommodation versus what you would find in the mobile home park or the subdivision style of development. The last item sort of relate along some of these categories that our ordinance addresses or defines are modular homes. Those are dwellings constructed of 2 or more major units that are assembled somewhere other than the site that they're intended to be resided in, and then they're conveyed there over the streets as well. So getting more specifically into the changes that we're proposing at this time. First, just sort of broadly throughout, we looked for outdated references to KRS Chapter 219. KRS Chapter 219 deals with a variety of things, but amongst it, it deals with things like mobile home subdivisions and campgrounds and things like that. So as I note here on this slide, our ordinance references KRS 219.120 through 219.250. And, from looking at least the LRC, the Legislative Research Commission's website, those subsections were all repealed back in 1972. So we have some very outdated references. And what we're proposing is to change those simply to refer to the chapter overall to hopefully avoid running into issues in the future with subsections being repealed and replaced with new language. Other changes in section 2.51.1 of the zoning ordinance, there's a lot of discussion or a lot of regulations regarding manufactured housing, qualified manufactured housing, and the like. The changes we're proposing in subsection A under that are to remove mobile home parks and subdivisions. So if you remember from our definitions we talked about before, those are some of the longer term, more permanent residence type developments, removing those as a conditional use in the B2 zone. The B2 zoning district is our highway commercial zoning district. So, sort of the reasoning there is just that it's not really an appropriate use to have long-term residential uses in our commercial zoning districts. Those commercial zoning districts are much better used for commercial purposes rather than residential purposes. Section 2.51.1 subsection D2 currently lists mobile home camps, so campgrounds essentially as a conditional use in the B3 zoning district, which is our central business district. So downtown Georgetown, parts of downtown Sadieville and Stamping Ground are all have B3 zoning. That's once again not really appropriate in those areas. So we're proposing that we change that reference to the B2 zoning district. It is in other parts of the zoning ordinance already listed as a conditional use in the B2 zoning district. That is a more appropriate use. If you, I guess in a way, when it comes down to it, there are some similarities at least between campgrounds and other transient accommodations like hotels, motels, things of that nature. Obviously, with it being a conditional use in that district, the Board of Adjustment would have to make some determinations about on a site-by-site basis about whether or not that proposed use is appropriate in the location that an applicant would be seeking that approval for. And then the last one I have here on this slide kind of deals with a similar thing under these mobile home camps, under campgrounds. There's some fairly vague language that require, where we ask the applicant to basically show that they made an attempt to provide privacy. And I've sort of reworded that simply to require privacy rather than requiring them to just show that they made an attempt, essentially. There were 3 more areas where we were proposing changes. And 2 of them are fairly similar. So under section 4.32, these are the conditional uses in the R1b and R1c zoning districts. We've proposed that we disallow mobile homes as a conditional use in the R1c district. Now, that would not apply to manufactured homes or qualified manufactured homes. That would apply to, as our ordinance defines them, mobile homes, those constructed before 1976, et cetera. And we've proposed basically the same change in section 4.35. Those are the conditional uses in the R2 and R3 zoning districts to disallow mobile homes on a single lot. The last change we're proposing is under the conditional uses in the B2 zoning district, so our highway commercial zoning district, to match the change we proposed previously on the last slide to disallow mobile home parks and mobile home subdivisions, so those longer term residential uses as conditional uses in the B2 district. And I believe that covers all of the changes that we are proposing at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Summers. Any questions for Matt on this? Comments? Thoughts? I do see one participant in the audience in attendance, so I'm not sure if Matt, would you like to unmute Mr. Greenwell? And I'm not sure if he's here just to listen or if he's here for this public hearing.
Mr. Greenwell, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Mr. Greenwell, are you there? Looks like he's still muted. Mr. Greenwell, if you need to speak or would like to speak, please go ahead and unmute your computer or cell phone, I guess. Okay, well, maybe he stepped away. Yeah, he'd been on the whole time. He was one of the other attendees throughout the whole meeting. Maybe he stepped away. Mr. Greenwell, if he is there, please go ahead and again, you can raise your hand and Matt will unmute you. Hopefully he'll either come back or raise his hand. So any other questions for Matt?
Matt, I had my question is there a place in are we allowing mobile home parks or mobile home subdivisions anywhere as a conditional use? Or
yeah, no, that's a good question. They would still be conditional uses in the R2 and R3 zoning districts. Whether or not somebody would actually choose to make an application for that, I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, in my, I guess, in the way that I view it, those would be, I guess, some of the more preferable zoning districts. Those are some of our urban residential districts, which would, we would typically only approve those zoning districts inside city limits, where developments like this would have access to public sewer and things of that nature.
I might be missing part of it. 4.35, it says disallow mobile homes.
Oh, yeah, I see the confusion. So what that's referring to is mobile homes on a single lot. So that would refer more to an existing lot. If there is a separate section where they can apply for a conditional use to I guess to have a subdivision created for that for the purpose of mobile homes. So yeah,
Disallow
so somebody
mobile homes
couldn't
on a single lot.
Yeah,
It would have to be a larger application then for a subdivision or for a.
That's correct.
Or a mobile home park. What's the distinction between a mobile home park or a mobile home subdivision? Mobile home park would be smaller lots, or subdivision be something
My reading of it, the distinction really is whether or not they actually subdivide the property, the larger parcel. So you could potentially have, if there was a 5-acre parcel that they wanted to, put 20 mobile homes on. The distinction between the two would be a park would be they would just leave the 5 acres as 5 acres and just place the mobile homes. Whereas the subdivision, they would actually subdivide it into smaller lots for mobile home placement.
And they would have individual ownership of the lots, I guess.
Yeah, potentially.
Whereas a mobile home park would probably have ownership throughout the park, one owner. All right.
Yes.
Any more questions, Matt? Comments, questions? If not, I'll again offer opportunity for Phil Greenwell to speak. It looks like he's still muted. Mr. Greenwell, if you're there, please unmute your phone or computer and please ask your question as this is a public hearing.
Move on.
I guess move on. Well, if there's no more questions or comments, I would actually then we need a motion probably to close the public hearing.
Mr. Chairman, you can do that.
I will close the public hearing then at this moment and move on. Thank you all. Anything, it looks like other businesses updated previously approved projects. You've got
actually,
Matt, you need a
Mark,
motion?
yeah, I think we need a motion to, I guess, whether or not to recommend these changes.
Thank you, Matt. Yep. I need a
council.
motion then to for the amendment to the zone text amendment mobile home public hearing that has been presented.
This is what, a recommendation to our fiscal court or
I guess we could just say a recommendation to the legislative bodies.
legislative bodies? Right.
And the vote would need to be by roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Perkins.
Mr. Chairman, I will make that motion to approve the amendment as presented by Mr. Summers.
So I've got a motion by Mr. Mifflin.
This is what to recommend it, right? To recommend it to the legislative bodies.
That's correct.
All right. I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Smith. So we'll, again, per Mr. Perkins, we will take a roll call. So this is to approve it, to send it to the legislative bodies. And we'll start by Mr. Vest. A yes would be to approve it, to send it on.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Mifflin,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Stone. No, Mr. Stone, you're muted.
Yep.
James Stone, you're muted. You need to unmute your computer and vote a yes or a no. Mr. Stone, I can't hear you. There.
Can't get, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes, thank you, sir. Dan Smith,
Yes.
DeJuan Garrett,
Yes.
and Mary Singer.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes as well. So passed unanimously. Thank you all. If there's nothing more on the agenda, I would say.
Mark, before you
Yes, sir.
close, did you want to talk about the May meeting, whether to go public or not?
Yes.
Personally, I know I've gotten a lot of phone calls from the commissioners saying they would like to go public. I mean, I'm open for a discussion. I mean, is anybody opposed to going public?
Now, if we do go, if we were to go to a in-person meeting next month, do you think we can handle it at the third floor of the courthouse, or do we need to go larger meeting space?
You know, Joe and I met earlier in the week at the water department. Matt was there as well. And they had there was what, 8 of us, Joe? And we were spaced out, each of us sitting at an 8-foot table to make sure we were spaced out that 6 foot apart. I don't think there's any way we can do that on the third floor of the courthouse. I would almost say we would have to maybe see if we can get the ag extension office, if possible, and then maybe somehow space chairs out 6 foot, and I think we could, even with spacing people out, I think we can fit a whole bunch more people in that room than we ever will in the courtroom.
That's true. However, I'm not sure if they're renting it out. I'm not sure if they're allowing people to serve it right now.
I think they are. I think they are. They've been,
okay.
I think AARP's been using it some.
Okay. We can look into that. Yeah, I guess talking to the judge the other day, it looks like they asked for an opinion. I think the health department, I think by May, will be allowed to have 50% occupancy at the courthouse 3rd floor room with 3-foot spacing and following all the health department protocols, so mask wearing and so forth. So we don't have a room occupancy yet. We're gonna have to figure that out, but I think it's around 60 because just based on my looking at it before, I mean 60 with the 3-foot spacing. So Matt and I were talking about 3 different options, and we didn't throw in a different meeting space, so we can look into that. That might be the better option. But we were thinking either keeping it Zoom, holding like a hybrid, because the fiscal court is doing a hybrid meeting. So they're doing a Zoom. They're having a Zoom meeting, but they're also meeting in person. So we could still have a Zoom meeting basically through the wireless internet up there, and there's a TV. You know, we can control so people can attend through Zoom, but we can still be meeting in person. But you know, there's going to be a limit to the number of space for people to, you know, I think it's about 60, but we'll have to verify. So one option would be to allow just the commissioners, staff, and the applicants to attend in person, make everybody else do it through Zoom, or have staff and commissioners in person and everybody else register for the meeting, first come, first serve. And then once we reach our capacity, tell everybody beyond that they need to do the Zoom version, the Zoom option. So either, you know, just the applicants and staff and commission, or, you know, first come, first serve. Or I guess the 4th option is reserve a larger room.
I would say personally, this is my opinion, if we can find out if that larger room is available, then I think we can open it up to everybody, because I really think that large room would hold probably there's been a few large crowds we've had in the past, one being in that large room for the landfill. But I mean, I would think our average attendance size, we could easily have in the Ag Extension office, have everybody socially distanced and be able to have an in-meeting person. The only thing we wouldn't be able to, or you guys would have to set up recording it.
Yeah, that would be getting the minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, to get the minutes, you'd have to get somebody to record the whole meeting. So I'm okay with that. I'm okay with having, if we do have it in the courthouse, because say we can't get the Ag Extension office, maybe having us there, the commissioners, staff, and then each applicant and anybody who wants to hear that particular application come into the room. If you're waiting on the next application, you're either going to be out in the hallway, outside, and it would be a little time consuming, but you could have maybe somebody go out and say, okay, next applicant, PDP 2021-15. If you're here for that application and are representing the applicant, please come in. The last applicant, please leave. And I mean, you know, you'd be shuffling people in and out. Maybe we can do it the opposite stairwells, so you're social distancing as they're walking in and out.
I'll be a little.
We can do it that way, Mr. Chairman. You've got to have the option of people being in on the entire meeting.
Oh, that's true, because it is a public.
Yeah, so we can't just have them blind in the hallway. They're going to have an outlet in the hallway or the overflow or something, or Zoom. You know, where everybody can be on at all times, and no one's asked to leave the public.
True, yeah, because we can't ask people to leave. If they want to stay from application 1 to the end of the meeting, they have that option, or should have that option. Well, then to Kane's point is we could do First come, first serve.
Yeah, okay. How about Matt and I look into it, investigate the option for getting, reserving a larger room, and we call the executive committee together at the end of next week and just make the decision. We'll present our recommendations on what we found, our discovery, and then we could send out a Zoom link for an executive committee meeting, maybe next Friday or Thursday or something.
That'd be fine.
Very fine.
Yeah, I'll
I
be
think that-
very anxious to get back in person. I'm done through over with the masks. I'm ready to go. Me and Charlie both.
Joe, did you say earlier that our May agenda is going to be fairly?
Yeah, I mean,
several things coming up?
it looks like it at this point, yes. Well,
Right.
I mean, we got five new applications in, and then we had 2 postponed from last month. So,
Yeah.
Technically 7.
I mean, yeah, a couple of them could postpone again. So, I mean, right now it's hard to say.
Joe, any of those total of 7 look to be a little scary? I mean, kind of because of your expertise, if we're gonna have or do most of them really simple.
There's one a development plan for townhomes on off Hiawatha and South Broadway that'll probably bring out some people.
Yes, that will. I know exactly which one you're talking about.
Yeah, so there's a few still.
All right.
What about Cherry Blossom? Are they still on for next month?
They postponed for a month. I mean, they want to sit down, meet with us. So we'll see. I mean, my feeling is it'll probably be postponed again.
All right, well, please, Joe and Matt and Ben, if you don't mind, please look into that as soon as you can. Find out what our best options are and/or next best options, and we can get together as an executive committee and vote on what we want to do. The sooner the better.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Any questions, comments, thoughts? Otherwise, I want to entertain a motion to
The one thing I would mention is that when we talk about the hybrid one, if you have Zoom attendance, once you've met your capacity, I state for people to show up there and then be turned away and then miss the first, if they drove 15 or 20 minutes to get there, and then try to get back home. And
like Joe said, we'll if that is what the option we go with, we'll open it up to sign on to be in attendance. And once we hit capacity, if you've tried to sign on, we'll turn them away ahead of time, not at the door, but ahead of time.
ahead of time. Okay.
Well, I think option 2, where everybody would Zoom except for commissioners and applicants and the staff, would probably be a safer route to go, but executive committee can hash that out when we meet there.
That or maybe a couple of, if you had some HOA president or representative of a group that could come and speak, rather than.
Then that gets kind of picky.
Yeah, it might.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
Right. I like the reservation idea. If you sign up until the spaces, just say
So
it's
let's
limited
say we've
space.
got, if Joe said 60, that's 60 people up in the 3rd floor. Once we hit 60, maybe assuming or not including staff and commission, Joe?
Right.
So right
yeah.
now we've got 12 of us.
Not commission. I'm not counting the commission seat.
Oh, it's not commission? So then,
That's several.
But if it's 60% or something capacity, then we would have to be included.
Well,
It's a capacity of a certain number, and 60% is a certain number, and that would have to include staff, commission.
Yeah.
I can't imagine they'd ever say 60%.
50%. 50% capacity.
Well,
Yeah.
then whatever the number is.
Yeah, I don't know what the capacity is. I'd have to find that out. Could be
Correct,
200.
it would include us.
well, get the details, Joe, and let's get into executive committee and we'll go from there.
Okay.
All right. Anything else?
Hey, I've got one quick question. I know the comprehensive plan is due to be reviewed. Who has that responsibility to initiate that? Planning and zoning or fiscal court?
Planning and zoning. We do.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is it next year? Or do we?
Well, it's goals and objectives this year. So first thing the only thing we need to do this year is review the goals and objectives and reapprove or amend and reapprove. And then once we have those guide the update of the text. So yeah, we plan on initiating that this year. We wanted to do some background research, kind of waiting a little bit on the census data release. Yeah, the plan was, we can talk about it more next time, but to kick that off in the summer, early summer.
Which is approaching fast.
It will be here before you know it.
The city actually just, the meeting we had earlier, we were talking to mayor and the judge and some other people, but we had talked about making a presentation to the city council fiscal court about the comp plan and about the process in June. So we should probably put that on our agenda in May to talk about that. So we'll do that.
Right.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Anything else? All right, I just need a motion to adjourn.
So
So
moved.
moved.
I heard a second.
I'll second.